Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Ah, I didn't have anybody come tonight, so I'm just going to go through the presentation I had intended to deliver this evening. So there's been lots going on in the UK. Those of you whose core country is to study this semester is the UK. You've probably know this. So I thought I might just give a um, brief overview, if you will, of Brexit. Hopefully, maybe now I can be heard a little bit better. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of Brexit. So you may be interested to know that the UK is due to leave the European Union at 2300 Greenwich Mean Time on the 31st of October this year. So what is Brexit? Let's find out. So Brexit stands for British Exit. Get my trusty British Exit. And it refers to the UK leaving the EU. What is the EU, or the European Union? Well, that is an economic and political union that involves 28 European countries. It allows free trade and free movement of people to live and work in whichever country they choose, similar to how we have here in the United States. I mean, if we want to go to Alabama or Florida, we don't need a passport to do that. So the UK joined the European Union in 1973 when it was known as the European Economic Community. If the UK leaves as planned on the 31st of October, it would be the first member state to withdraw from the EU. So why is the UK leaving? Well, public vote or referendum was held on the 23rd of June in 2016 to decide whether the UK should leave or remain in the European Union. Leave won by 52%, and then to stay was 48%. The referendum turnout was very high at 72%, with more than 30 million people voting. 17.4 million people voted for Brexit. So, why hasn't it happened yet? Brexit was due to happen on the 29th of March in 2019, which was 2 years after then Prime Minister Theresa May triggered what's known as Article 50, which was the formal process to leave, and kicked off negotiations. But the Brexit date has been delayed twice. The UK and the EU agreed to a deal in November 2018, but the members of Parliament, or MPs, rejected it 3 times. So, what is the Brexit deal? Well, the deal consists of a binding withdrawal agreement, which set out the terms for this divorce process, if you will, because they are kind of divorcing, and a non-binding political declaration of the nature of the future relationship between the UK and the EU. The withdrawal agreement covered a range of things, including the rights of EU citizens in the UK and British citizens in the EU, how much money the UK was to pay the EU, which is widely thought to be about 39 billion pounds, the backstop for the Irish border. Okay, and I'm going to explain the backstop in just a minute. So, why did Parliament reject the Brexit deal? Well, the main sticking point for many conservatives, conservative members of Parliament, is what they call the backstop. Currently, there are no border posts, physical barriers, or checks on people or goods crossing the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. The backstop is designed to ensure that the this continues after the UK leaves the EU. It comes into effect only if a comprehensive free trade deal is not quickly agreed between the UK and the EU. It would keep the UK effectively inside the EU's customs union, but with Northern Ireland also conforming to some rules of the single market. Critics say a different status for Northern Ireland could threaten the existence of the United Kingdom, and fear that the backstop could become permanent. But supporters say it is necessary to maintain peace with Northern Ireland. So essentially, the problem is that there is a 310-mile Irish border that will represent the only land border between the United Kingdom and the EU. As well as no longer being in the EU, Northern Ireland is likely to end up with different rules and standards to its neighbor, the Republic of Ireland. That's because the UK intends to leave the customs union and single market arrangements designed to make trade easier between EU countries. Lorries or trucks traveling to the EU from Northern Ireland would be required to stop at the border for document checks and some product inspections. This would be to ensure that their goods meet EU standards. Following some incidences like foot and mouth disease and the horse meat scandal, the EU is very strict about these requirements. In theory, such checks would mean things like cameras and security posts, creating a so-called hard border. Concerns have been raised that the return of a hard border could jeopardize the Good Friday Agreement, which, as you probably recall, helped bring the period of violence between Northern Ireland, known as the Troubles, to an end. So why hasn't it been sorted out yet? The UK and EU Brexit negotiations came up with a solution known as the Irish backstop to avoid border checks. If used, the backstop would keep the UK in a very close relationship with the EU until trade deals permanently avoiding the need for checks is agreed. However, the backstop proved unacceptable to many conservative MPs who feared the UK would be trapped in it indefinitely. Their opposition eventually led to Theresa May's resignation as Prime Minister. Boris Johnson, the new Prime Minister, said a revised Brexit deal must include the abolition of the backstop. He says the current solution would mean signing away the UK's economic independence. So can technology solve the problem? A wealth of solutions, including technology, could replace the backstop and avoid the need for a hard border. Boris Johnson said during the Tory leadership campaign. Supporters say custom checks could be done at warehouses before lorries or trucks set off. Mobile phone technology or microchips on lorries would be tracked for goods and avoid the need for guest border hosts. However, the EU does not currently share a single border with a non-EU country, where checks have been completely eliminated. That includes Norway, which is not in the EU, and Sweden, which is an EU member, which share one of the most technologically advanced borders in the world. Their main crossing point processes about 1,300 trucks a day, each waiting about 20 minutes on average. The EU said it will consider other solutions to the Irish border problem, but only once the current Brexit deal has been signed off. It also expressed doubts about a technological solution. The problem with just relying on technology is the EU also requires some products be physically checked, chemicals and food among them. So what else can be done? Alongside technology, Mr. Johnson has also talked about a trusted trader scheme. Businesses would be allowed to bypass checks once they have proven to be trustworthy and have met certain standards. For it to work, the UK would need to persuade the EU to recognize it. But setting up such a scheme would take a lot of time and a lot of money. The UK would also need to come up with an effective way of enforcing and to prevent smuggling. So can the UK leave with no deal? Well, Prime Minister Boris Johnson wants the EU to remove the backstop from the deal. He wants alternative arrangements and technological solutions instead. But the EU has so far refused to change the backstop. Mr. Johnson and the said UK must leave on October 31st, even if that's without a deal. So what is the U.S. and customs single market? Well, the customs union ensures that all EU countries charge the same taxes on goods which are coming from the outside. They do not charge taxes on others' goods, but members cannot strike their own trade deals. The single market enables goods and services to be services, money, and people to move between all 28 EU member states, as well as Iceland, Norway, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland, who are members of the European Economic Area. Countries in the single market may apply common rules, many common rules and standards. A UK company can sell its products or goods in Portugal and easily as it can in Portsmouth bring them back the cash or the capital, offer maintenance services, and dispatch a repair team. Will a no deal cause disruption? If the UK leaves the customs union and single market, then the EU will start carrying out some of its checks on British goods. This could lead to delays at ports such as Dover. Some fear that this could lead to traffic bottlenecks, disrupting supplies routes and damaging the economy. Well, what happens next for Brexit? Well, officially, the UK is due to leave the EU on 31 October 2019. However, with the risk of no deal rising, MPs from different parties voted through a law enforcing government to seek a third Brexit extension. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will have to request a Brexit extension from the EU on October 19th, pushing the deadline back to 31 January 2020. The only exception is if MPs are approved a Brexit deal or vote in favor of leaving with no deal. Should the EU want a different deadline, Mr. Johnson will be forced to accept it unless MPs vote to reject it within 2 days. Any extension of the UK has got to be agreed upon by all members of the EU. So there is no guarantee that the UK will be offered one. So what about an early election? After the MPs voted in favor of extending the Brexit deadline, Boris Johnson tried to call an early election, but not enough MPs supported him. To trigger an early election, at least two-thirds must back the idea. The PM, Prime Minister, will bring another vote to Commons, but opposition MPs are likely to reject it again. They say they won't back it until the law aimed at blocking a no-deal Brexit is implemented. So how will the no-deal Brexit affect the British people? Well, if the pound falls sharply in response to no deal, then there are significant delays at ports like Dover. It could affect the price and availability of some goods and foods. There are also concerns over potential shortages of medicine, although the government has said much preparation has been done to avoid this. So, where does EU food or UK food come from? EU citizens in the UK can apply for settled status, allowing them to remain in the country even if there is no deal. UK expats in the European Union are advised to register as residents in the county in which they live. UK citizens traveling to the EU will need to ensure passports are valid for at least 6 months on 31 October and will require international driving permits if intending to use a car. The EU health insurance cards will no longer be valid. Pet passports will no longer be valid. A large range of other cities and consequences have been discussed. So this increase on taxes and transport delays could all mean a rise in prices. And if no deal Brexit was followed by a fall in the value of the pound, that would also have the same effect. Supermarkets themselves have warned that there could be empty shelves and higher prices. And the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney has said that the worst case scenario, our shopping bills could increase by 10%. So the government has said that while a no-deal Brexit alone won't lead to food shortages, consumer behavior could. Panic buying could mean food retailers run short of some products. In preparation, supermarkets say they have been stockpiling some foods, but they are unable to do that for some fresh fruits and vegetables. Sainsbury's, which is a store in the UK, has also said October would be one of the worst times for the UK to exit the EU without a deal because the warehouse capacity is already strained by the seasonal stock buildup ahead of Black Friday and Christmas. Limiting supermarkets' abilities to store goods ahead of Brexit. Shoppers planning to buy from companies in the EU, Norway, Liechtenstein, and Iceland after a no-deal Brexit have also been warned about credit and debit card charges that may be higher and payments may take longer. 1/3 of the food that the UK eats comes from the EU. That's significant. Okay, that's my last slide. So if there were people here, we could do a little more. But just know that Brexit is something that some say it is good for the EU, for the UK, others say that it's not. So please stay tuned to your TVs because things seem to be happening every day. I'm going to remain here in the room. I'm going to cut off the recording, or I won't cut off the recording, but I'll cut off the mic. And please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, folks, I'm going to sign off because nobody came to the session tonight. But if you have any questions or need any additional help, please feel free to reach out to me.